Today we are going to talk about a concept known as groupthink. Groupthink is part of a social psychology paper. The main objectives in this lesson is to understand the concept of groupthink, the groupthink model, which includes antecedents of groupthink, symptoms of groupthink, consequences of groupthink. Then we will understand how to combat this groupthink. Generally, whenever we talk about decision making, we talk about individual decision making. We as individuals always engage in the process of decision making on a regular basis. Then the question that is often asked is, are two heads better than one? That is, if a group's decision making is better than an individual decision making. It is common for us to assume that decision making in a group would be informed decision. A group may not be subject to biases of one individual, but the common observation has been that sometimes a seemingly reasonable, considerate and intelligent group can also make a decision which proves to be disastrous. A theorist called as 𝗳𝗧 in 1982 proposed that this may result from a process called as groupthink. 𝗳𝗧 defined groupthink as deterioration of mental efficiency, reality testing and moral judgment that results from in-group pressures. In groupthink, the group reaches a decision regarding any issue without allowing members to express their doubts and views. It occurs when groups do not care to find out who is the most competent person in the group. Therefore, the advice of an incompetent group member is taken. At times, a competent member in the minority may be faced with opposition, leading to their opinion or idea not being taken into account. It also happens that in certain group, members don't listen to each other, while in some groups, one person tends to dominate the discussion, while others choose to just suppress their thoughts. Failure to share important information also leads to inefficient decision making. Further, the group cohesiveness has also been found to obstruct clear thinking and good decision making. A group is said to be cohesive when its members have a deep sense of commitment to each other and each other's group goals. Members of the group also share a close bond here. Once the groupthink sets in, for whatever reason, the result is ill-considered and disastrous decision. Let us now try to understand how the concept of groupthink leads to disastrous decisions. In the world of business, where decisions are usually made after much analysis, there have been some bad decisions which have wiped out successful giants. You have heard about Kodak, a company which made cameras and was very popular worldwide. But all this was before the invasion of digital photography. Kodak could not survive when digital photography replaced film. The point here I am trying to explain to you is about the company that made devastating wrong decision in spite of having solid evidence against it. The first digital camera was invented by an engineer at Kodak in the year 1975. In 1981, extensive study was done by Kodak showed that digital was likely to replace Kodak's film business in about 10 years. Surprisingly, Kodak did not use this time to capitalize on their invasion of digital camera and were not willing to shift focus to digital technology. As a result, Kodak went from 90% market share in US camera sales in 1976 to less than 10% in 2012. Eventually, it went bankrupt. The major debacle for Kodak could be because of groupthink. When groupthink sets in, the group believes that decision is unanimous, even when considerable dissent may exist. In a nutshell, the groupthink is characterized by strong pressures toward unanimity and endorsement of the leader's viewpoint, and decisions taken in such conditions are usually unsuccessful. Next, let us discuss the groupthink model, which will help us to understand the concept further. An influential theory of group decision making was proposed by a theorist Irving Janis, based on his observation of real world events. This theory is the groupthink theory of decision making. It is a kind of thinking in which maintaining group cohesiveness and solidarity is more important than considering the facts in a realistic manner. The group places more importance on reaching an agreement rather than considering facts objectively. Group members are not encouraged to voice differing opinions here. Certain groups would even punish its members for their dissenting opinions. In certain cases, consequences of groupthink might not be very significant, but in other instances, for example, those involving military decisions, it could mean death and destruction. �ฤ๖𝗃 theorized that certain antecedents or factors would predispose or say will influence the group to groupthink. The groupthink model also lists out antecedents of groupthink, symptoms of groupthink, consequences of groupthink. We will now try to understand these aspects in detail. According to �ฤανής, there are some antecedent factors or causes that cause groupthink. Firstly, when the group is highly cohesive. Cohesiveness refers to the close bond the group members share with each other. Members in cohesive group are very close to each other. There is high level of commitment towards each other as well as the goals of the group. It is of paramount interest that harmony in the group may be maintained. Membership in the group is very important to all group members. Therefore, groupthink often occurs highly in cohesive groups. For example, sometimes in a family, we make decisions based on our love and affection rather than understanding if it is practically possible. Then the next aspect is group isolation. Sometimes the group is not aware of the information of outside world. Thus, the group is isolated from alternative viewpoint. Group members are unaware of the strategies other groups use to make decisions. Critical analysis of alternative is not done because group members are insulated from the outside world. Group members are therefore blind to vast variety of alternatives available to take into account. Then the next antecedent is related to the leader or directive leader. Groupthink is likely to occur in the presence of a directive leader, a leader who takes charge, makes decisions independently, conveys the information to the group member and does not see the need for any kind of feedback. The leader here holds his stand on a particular issue very strongly. Group members therefore accept the decision taken by this kind of leader unhesitatingly. Then the concept of high stress. When the members perceive some kind of threat to the group, they are in the state of distress. This group subsequently is more likely to make poor decisions than a group that is relatively free from stress. �ฤανής closely observed many historical events and concluded that high level of stress that was experienced by group members was a contributory factor to groupthink. A decision that has to be made with very little time at hand increases the probability of groupthink. Then lastly, it is poor decision making procedures. When the group had no prior experience in making certain kinds of decisions or has not developed and used a standard method of decision making, it is a precondition to groupthink. The group therefore does not consider and weigh other alternatives, but depends on the opinion of the leader or the majority, one that may not be the best possible decision. After this, let's talk about the symptoms of groupthink. These symptoms are like the warning signs that will tell you that groupthink in a group will set in. The main symptoms here. Firstly, it is the illusion of invulnerability. This is when the group feels it is invincible and would never make any errors. This kind of approach would make members blind to their vulnerabilities or weaknesses. As a result of this kind of thinking, they engage in taking risky decisions without taking any possible negative outcomes into consideration. Then the next is belief in the moral correctness of the group. The group assumes that whatever they do is morally correct and that they are somehow superior to other groups. The ethical and moral ramifications of their decisions are not assessed. A group that believes they are incapable of doing any wrong is at heightened risk of groupthink. The next symptom is stereotyped views of out-group. Group members hold false generalization about members of other groups. Outside groups are seen as either too foolish to reason with, or too evil to negotiate with, or too insignificant and weak to even consider. Groups are then on the path to develop an us versus them mentality, which leads to groupthink. Then there is a concept called as collective rationalization. It is a tendency of a group to collectively justify its decisions without regard for any contrary opinions. Contrary opinions are dismissed as insignificant. Groups are not open to evaluating the risks of their decisions as they have convinced themselves that the decision they have taken is the best. Then comes self-censorship. Members of the group decide not to voice differing viewpoints in order to not rock the boat and upset the harmony of the group. Group members do give due importance to their viewpoints. They decide to avoid deviating from the stand of the majority even they implicitly believe otherwise. Then there is direct pressure on dissenters to conform. In certain situations, group members apply direct pressure on those holding contrary opinions to conform to the viewpoint of the majority or the leader. Dissenting group members may be threatened if they do not silence themselves. Illusion of unanimity. Members of group believe in the illusion that all members of the group are in agreement. There would therefore be no need to any kind of discussion. Members who are likely to have differing opinion are not called upon to share their viewpoints. This definitely will lead to groupthink. Lastly, there are mind guards. Mind guards are those self-appointed members of the group who keep certain viewpoints away from the leader. They ensure that the leader is unaware of any objections raised by the members in the group. Therefore, when such kind of thinking and opinions arise within the groupthink is likely to set in. But what happens when groupthink finally sets in? We have already learned that it leads to disastrous decisions. But before that, it also leads to several other consequences. First and foremost, there will be incomplete survey of alternatives. This happens when group members do not engage in looking for alternatives proactively because they are already content with the opinion of their leader or the majority. The group assumes there is no other better alternative and would not bother to survey other reasonable alternatives. Next, there will be failure to examine risks of the favored alternative. When the group members fail to evaluate the risks of the alternative they are inclined to choose, it could lead to a situation wherein the group is completely clueless as to what their response must be when faced with an unprecedented outcome. This means they do not know how to react when a different situation arises, as they did not examine any other alternative. Then comes the aspect of poor information search. When group members are not equipped with information concerning all the alternatives available, the pros and cons of choosing a particular alternative and what they must expect after having chosen an alternative, etc., will lead to a wrong decision. Finally, there is failure to develop contingency plans. When group members fail to evaluate the possible loopholes in their decision, they do not prepare themselves for any possible outcomes. This unpreparedness has disastrous consequences in that group members are unaware of how to deal with the outcomes. After learning the antecedents, symptoms and consequences of groupthink, I am sure you understand that combating groupthink is very important. Combating groupthink is helpful in enhancing the effectiveness of group decision making and also in avoiding making wrong decisions. Now, coming to how to combat groupthink. At the outset, it is important for group members to be aware of the possibility of engaging in making best possible decision and recognize the faulty behavior patterns, if any. Further, adequate steps have to be taken to avoid the groupthink trap in the future. Keeping the following points in mind can help in the process of combating groupthink. The first is to remain impartial. It is important for the group leader to be unbiased, not displaying favoritism to any individual or subgroup. It would be helpful for the leader to express his or her opinion only after all members have expressed and analyzed their opinions. The leader should not exert control over the discussion, but should create a conducive atmosphere for members to express their thoughts freely. Leader must also be open to criticism. Then the next aspect is to seek outside opinion. Rather than being isolated from alternative viewpoints, groups must proactively seek outside opinions. At times, Being unaware of the latest developments in the outside world would render the group oblivious to relevant information to consider in order to make a decision. Seeking the expertise of outsiders and being willing to consider it reduces the chance of groupthink. Then the next is creating subgroups. Creating subgroups helps group members discuss their opinions freely, evaluating both the pros and cons of their viewpoint without knowing the opinion of the rest of the group. A smaller group with members who are encouraged to voice their opinions facilitate efficient discussion. These subgroups can later on sit together and discuss their findings in order to make more informed decision. Then the next method is to seek anonymous opinions. Group members who have differing opinions may be afraid to state them thanks to the fear of being punished or being disliked by the group. Therefore, seeking the opinions of group members anonymously would ensure all opinions are brought to the table for thorough examination. The next method to combat groupthink is to adopt a standard decision-making process. In order to make effective decisions, it is very important that a group develops a diligently uses standard process to make decisions. Finally, the aspect of playing the devil's advocate. When an individual plays devil's advocate, he or she is assigned to express an opinion contrary to that held by the majority in the group in order to examine the validity of the opposing ideas through debate. The research on groupthink indicates that groupthink can occur even when some of the antecedents are missing. For example, groupthink can also occur in absence of directive leader and the presence of group members who engage in ineffective communication. Research has found that strongly identifying with the group, knowing the norms of the group are good enough reasons for groupthink to occur. It is important to note that 𝗳𝗧 groupthink's theory has not been met with sound empirical evidence. Researchers have found that group cohesiveness does not always contribute to groupthink. Directive leaders in highly cohesive groups are capable of making optimal decisions. In conclusion, it can be said that groupthink provides a valuable insight into potential pitfalls of group decision making. Supporters of groupthink concept agree that processes that cause groupthink are more complex than what 𝗳𝗧 had originally thought. With this conclusion, we come to the end of the concept. Now let us summarize what have we learned today in this lesson. Social psychological research has consistently found that presence of other people influences our behavior in many ways. An important aspect to consider is the process of decision making in groups. Decision making refers to the process of choosing between alternatives. A host of factors influence the decision making process when there is a group involved. At times, certain aspects of group interaction can lead to inefficient problem solving. This is referred to as process loss. More often than not, individuals in a group aim to achieve consensus among themselves even at the expenses of giving their personal beliefs. The focus is on maintaining the cohesiveness of the group. Decision made by group members thereby may suffer from lack of objectivity. Individuals who have differing opinions in a group would choose to accept the viewpoint of the majority in the group rather than rocking the boat by making their opinions known. A social psychologist, 𝗂𝗏 explored this concept in great depth and coined the term groupthink. Groupthink is a kind of thinking in which maintaining group cohesiveness and solidarity is more important than considering facts in a realistic manner. 𝗳𝗧 in his groupthink model proposed a number of antecedents, symptoms and consequences of groupthink. Antecedents are the factors that predispose the group to groupthink. Symptoms describe the characteristics of a group that has fallen in the groupthink trap. Consequences are the results of groupthink. The antecedents of groupthink are as follows. The group is highly cohesive group and places a great emphasis on avoiding conflicts. The group is isolated from the viewpoints of both members of the group who hold differing opinion as well as members of other groups. The group lacks an experienced directive leader who takes the lead in decision making. The group is in state of distress due to the perception of some kind of threat. Next, the group does not generally adopt any standard methods in decision making process, strategies to consider and weigh alternatives. Then, the symptoms of groupthink are as follows. The group believes it can never be wrong. The group sees their actions as being morally correct. Then, the group stereotypes other group members. The group provides justification for the actions without taking important information into account. The members who have differing opinions in the group choose to suppress their ideas or thoughts so as to maintain the harmony of the group. The members who constitute the majority of the group pressurize members in the group minority to conform. The group creates an illusion that all members of the group are in agreement. The leader of the group is protected from hearing differing opinions within the group. The group collectively justifies its actions. Then comes the consequences of groupthink, which are: group members do not survey all alternatives before making a decision. The risks associated with chosen alternative are not examined. Group members do not engage in equipping themselves with necessary information needed to make a decision. Then, the group does not consider any contingency plans. Further, we learned that it is important that groups should be open to recognize and take steps to avoid falling in groupthink trap. Groupthink can be effectively combated by remaining unbiased and open to new information, seeking opinions from members of other groups, creating subgroups in the group and having them to explore the alternatives at hand, seeking the anonymous opinion of group members. Group members should also create an atmosphere that facilitates the exploring of objections raised by the members of the group.